Okay, so I was talking to Barb earlier today, and I told her that step 9, well, I say this a lot, though. I'll say this is my favorite step. But tonight it's step 9, so I'm going to say that step 9 is my favorite step. It really is one of my favorites. So in step 8, as we were reading in the 12 by 12 on step 8, the very last, where we make a list, right? We make a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make the amends to them all. And right at the end of that chapter in the 12 and 12, it says, it is the beginning of the end of isolation from our fellows and from God. And that's been my experience with step 8 and 9. So I think that's why I like to say it's my favorite step. Next week I'll probably say step 10 is my favorite step. You guys will have to just all forgive me. So the spiritual principles that I thought of when I was thinking about step 9 today and getting ready for tonight were faith and discipline. Somewhere in the Big Book, I don't know where, it says that we are an undisciplined lot.
Page 88.
Right.
Yeah.
Page 88. Thank you, Kate. And I have found that that's true not just for alcoholics, but for Al-Anons as well. And so the definition of faith that I found today that I liked was complete trust or confidence in someone or something. And then discipline said, train yourself to behave and work in a strictly controlled and regular way. Now, normally, we would tell Al-Anons to stop trying to control things, right? Because Al-Anonism is a disease of control and dependence. But I found it particularly apropos when talking about step 9, because I think it takes a lot of faith, and a lot of discipline to engage step 9 in your life. So those were the first things I kind of talked about. And then I thought we'd talk a little bit about harm. So step 9 says, we may direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others, right? So what we're trying to do in step 8, we learned that there are 4 aspects to the harm that we can do to other folks in our life, that there's mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual harm. So when I'm thinking about the amends process, I find it helpful to think very particularly about the harm that I may have caused another human being. And I thought if you guys were willing, that it might be kind of helpful maybe to talk about what would be some examples of causing mental harm, physical harm, emotional harm, or spiritual harm to another human being. I'll start. Because you've heard me talk about the very, very conservative fundamental religion that I was in for a long time, and I brought my kids up in that religion. And it was so strict, my friends, and so confining that I felt after I got out and really had a chance to look at the decisions I'd made around religion and kind of let's say forced on my family, that I felt like that had done some spiritual harm to my children. In retrospect, it certainly wasn't a loving religion. It was all about the fear of God, all about the fear of punishment. So that was an example that I thought of today when I was trying to think of what it would mean maybe to spiritual harm somebody. So I'd like to just open it up for a minute. You guys can put your thinking caps on. Mine's been on all day. It might be a little tired. And if you can think of some particular examples of harm that we could do another human being that would call for an amends.
I'm just thinking of my children, the emotional harm I caused them by being 2 different people.
Good.
Being giving and loving, and then being angry and hateful, and they never knew
Good.
which person to.
which who is going to be there when, yeah. I think that's a great example of some emotional harm and maybe mental too. Since we're kind of teaching our children to navigate the world, right? And we've talked about how in the family system, really the parents, it's the mother and the father that give the children their first lessons about God, because they kind of are the gods in the house, right? They're making the decisions. They're calling the shots. So I like that one. I think it's easy to talk about physical harm. You know, any kind of aggression, right? Any kind of aggression would be a form of physical harm. Even if the person isn't hurt physically. I'm thinking of a man that I worked with years ago whose father was severely alcoholic, and he beat his mother on a regular basis in front of the children. Now, this young man growing up in this house was not beaten, but he might as well have been, right? Because that physical aggression, you know, harmed him probably in all of these ways, really, if you think about it. Barb?
Mental maybe is staying silent.
Say a little more about that. I like it.
Well,
Don't go silent.
well, if let's say you have siblings, and you don't, I don't know how to explain it, or a parent, and okay, let's say it's a parent and they're doing something that really bothers you, and you just stay silent, because to say something would be even a bigger mistake.
Okay. And so in that situation, I think
So you don't say anything.
the harm would be that the parents would be harming the children in that way. So the child remaining silent is not necessarily harming the parents.
Oh, you don't think that mentally is harming the parents?
No, because I think if a child doesn't feel safe to speak, they're not going to speak, and it's okay. And it's okay, right? But I was thinking, when you said being silent, I was thinking about what we call the silent treatment, right? Right? Passive aggressive, yeah. So silence can be used to push people around, right? That's a form of, it's called passive aggressive. It's aggression, actually. It's just passive aggressive. Anybody else? Ah, good. If I stole all your money, if I got into your bank account, took all your money, in what way would that harm you?
Mentally.
Mentally,
Emotionally.
maybe physically. What if you couldn't take care of yourself and your children anymore? Yeah, absolutely. One of the people that I've worked with in the past said, you know, lie, cheat, steal, you owe amends for that stuff, you know. Now, again, we're talking about adult behavior here. Someone asked a great question, I think the last time we met, about things that happened when she was a child. I believe it was you, ma'am. Yeah. And, you know, when we're children, we do not bear the same weight of responsibility that we do when we're adults. But if our childish, fear-based behaviors follow us into adulthood, then they become harmful to other people. They can become harmful to other people.
Can you describe some spiritual examples of spiritual harm?
I think that for me, the easiest one is the one I talked about. You know, I kind of taught my children that God and life and the universe was to be feared, that there was a judgment coming, and by God, if they weren't really close to perfect, they were not going to be okay. So I think the way that harms people is it teaches them to fear God, and I don't believe in fearing God. I believe that love is the only way. We got two people. Sasha?
Paradoxically, I think for myself, being taught that God did not exist
Yeah.
is a harm.
Oh, cool.
Say what?
God does not exist.
No.
There ain't no help for you.
God.
Good luck with all that.
Yeah.
There is no God. Yeah, you're on your own.
Yep.
I like that. And I would pay you money to say paradoxically again, just because it was,
Oh.
it sounded so English when you said it. You should always talk like that. Anybody else?
Yeah, my little great-grandson came home, and for discipline at his school, which is I don't know what religious, but it was a Christian school supposedly, if they're naughty, they are told that they won't get God's blessings. And I thought that was the cruelest thing I ever heard.
Yeah.
My God is always there. He's
Yeah.
always willing to bless you.
Yeah.
God is love, right?
That
God
was
is, love is what God
And
has to
it's
give. Love.
unconditional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great example of kind of twisting a mind, maybe in fear.
We had 6 kids, and we were all just the church thing was just to get my mother a break from us. So I don't know about the other brothers and sisters. I don't talk to them, but it was just a getaway break from the house. A
Yeah.
getaway.
So that again is not a
Getaway.
loving reason to go somewhere and
No,
right and learn about God.
Get away.
Good.
So Alice,
So, is it, are you focusing on the harm that you caused another's relationship with God?
I would say it's more about passing on that generational fear, passing on that stuff in families that really does hurt people. And even if I will tell you, friends, that my intentions in that church could not have been better. They could not have been any better. I was convinced that I was doing the right thing, right? And yet, you know, being raised with a lot of fear, having some trauma as a child, you know, even if it's unintentional, when we pass that stuff on to our children, we owe them an amends. So I have made both direct amends to my children, where I've sat down and talked to them face to face, some of them more than once. Interestingly enough, some of them don't remember it, which is so interesting to me. But so direct amends, but we've talked about it in here. The most important thing to the people you're close to is the living amends, where you change like you change, and they can see that you've changed and that things are different, and that's a living amends. Yeah. So I think parents bear some responsibility for what happens to their children. Those children are off the hook about that stuff, but when they grow up and do the same thing, then God and the universe is going to engage them in a dialogue about who they are, what they do, and what needs to be different. And my own experience with that was that message got louder and louder. The more I resisted it, the more I stayed in kind of my old way of doing things, the worse things got for me, really, until I was willing to surrender. That's the first step, right? We give it up. We give it up. So you could, if Chris were doing step 9, we would be here for 3 weeks. That was a dig, Chris. Not really. But step 9 is rich. There's a lot of really good information on step 9. So I think we're going to try to get through this tonight. But just know that the Big Book, pages 76 to 84, and I'm going to read some excerpts from that for you. Amazing discussion of step 9. And then the 12 and 12, again, is just really, really good on step 9. So let's dive into that a little bit, and then we'll talk a little bit more. So, step 9 in the Big Book begins on page 76. It says here, now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. Okay? That's what we're trying to do. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves, right? And then on the next page, it tells us what the purpose of an amends is. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and to the people about us, right? A little farther down the page, it talks about what if we're making amends to someone who doesn't like us or someone we dislike, which happens, right, where we have to do that. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. Okay? Expressing our regret. I love these words. This next part is so good. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. And we're going to talk a little bit about the process of amends, and that's going to be important to remember. We do not criticize or argue. And then it talks a little bit about money. People that have a belief in not enough and lack and have money issues really often owe financial amends. Okay? We do not dodge our creditors, telling them what we are trying to do. We make no bones about our drinking, or for Al-Anons, about our behavior. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. So I want to tell a quick story about financial amends. My husband and I had a wholesale bakery that we started ourselves, worked it several years. It did really well. We took on a partner and put it in a retail shop, and we trusted that partner to do all the books and all the bookkeeping. For myself, what that meant was I abdicated responsibility. I had a lot of fear about money, and I didn't really want to look at the money. Like, that's that la 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 thing I do, right? So kind of ignored the whole thing. Push come to shove, a few years later, we found out that the taxes hadn't been paid and that we personally owed a large pile of money. I think it was about $75,000. No? How much? $250? Holy shit, that's worse. $250,000. So, gulp. What are we going to do about this mess? And at that time, my husband and I were both kind of working with Chris, and he made a suggestion that we kind of put it in God's hands and put some feelers out there about who could help us with this gigantic mess. And my husband found a group of students at DU that were learning to be tax lawyers, and they agreed to help us for guess how much money? None. Pro bono. And they got that tax bill down for us to, it was like $100 a month for a year, and we were done. So, how does that happen, right? How in the world does stuff like that happen? You guys heard me talk about my house. We got just an unbelievable deal on our house. So that's the difference between being afraid of money, afraid there's not enough, childlike. Childlike about money was a big problem for me. I had a very childlike aspect around money, and it hurt me, and it hurt my family, right? I was the queen of making do with nothing. That's not much fun. That's just not much fun. So, I've heard lots of stories. Ours is the best, I think, on money miracles. But that's what happens when we do not dodge our creditors, right? We don't dodge, but we look to God for a solution that will work for us. Perhaps we have committed a criminal offense, which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. I'm on page 78 at the last paragraph, right at the bottom. And then on 79, paragraph 1 at the bottom, it's talking again about what happens if we've done something that's illegal. What should we do about that? We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit or the Al-Anon pit. Okay? So when you get into situations where your conduct has involved and will involve other people, that's when that part of the 9th step that says, may direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And this is kind of why I think the 9th step can be a little dicey, and we need to work through it with a sponsor, period. Because when we start to talk about issues like this, we need more than our wisdom working on our behalf. Okay? The Big Book talks about infidelity as well. So if there's been infidelity in a marriage, do you reveal that to your spouse? Do you not? That's a question worth giving long and serious thought to, right? Long and serious thought. Because there's no pat answer. My sponsor told me a long time ago, and it kind of blew my mind. It's not about there's these rules, Alice, and if you follow all the rules, you're going to be okay. It's about attaching to a higher power and having love-based intuition that directs your life instead of fear. So I just wanted to mention kind of those situations that this chapter talks about. And then if you skip over to page 82, so this was true of me as an Al-Anon. The Al-Anon is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead, affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. And to me, this is like being an Al-Anon, coming to meetings and never changing anything. You know, never really. There's such power in the steps, friends. There is power for change here. And to me, it's a tragedy when someone comes to meetings, the meetings make them feel better temporarily, and they go on their way and nothing changes. You know, because there's real power here for change. There is a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fit the bill at all. And then the second paragraph on 83, the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. We have to live it. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. And there may be valid reason for postponement in some cases. But we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. Okay? So that's, Barb, do you have a thought?
I just have a question for you. That's all, really good stuff you're reading. When you said the church was a big part of your life, didn't your church kind of like become your family too? Didn't you get real close to members of your church?
I did.
Mm-hmm. So did you have to do the 9th step with people?
I did not. In this particular religion, if you leave, you're shunned.
Oh, if you leave, you're shunned.
If you leave, you're shunned. It's the unforgivable sin
Oh.
to leave. It's not forgivable. You've trespassed against God. They say you're an apostate, which is an enemy of God.
Okay.
And so no. And I think because they were adults, doing the same thing, I would not have owed them amends.
I just wondered.
Yeah, I
You
don't.
weren't living true to your word.
Well, I don't. Some people that religion works for them, so I hate to call it a cult, but that's not the first time I've heard that.
I just wondered when you were breaking away if you just weren't true to your church. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Do I know? I don't know.
Okay. Step 9 in the 12 and 12. I like this part too. Good judgment, a careful sense of timing, courage, and prudence. These are the qualities we shall need when we take step 9. After we've made a list of people we have harmed, have reflected carefully upon each instance, and have tried to possess ourselves of the right attitude in which to proceed, we will see that the making of direct amends divides those we should approach into several classes. There will be those who ought to be dealt with just as soon as we become reasonably confident that we can maintain our own sobriety. There will be those to whom we can make only partial restitution, lest complete disclosure to them or others do more harm than good. There will be other cases where action ought to be deferred, and still others in which, by the very nature of the situation, we will never be able to make direct personal contact at all. Good judgment will suggest that we ought to take our time. And then I thought this might be the most important sentence in this chapter. We cannot buy our own peace of mind at the expense of others. That's why we're careful what we make amends for, okay? We don't make amends to make ourselves feel better, right? We're trying to clear up the wreckage of the past and own what we've done to other people that have caused them harm, okay? Against this backdrop, we can freely admit the damage we have done and make our apologies. We can pay or promise to pay whatever obligations, financial or otherwise, we owe, okay? If we have prepared ourselves well in advance, such reactions will not deflect us from our steady and even purpose. So that was talking about if someone we make amends to is unhappy with us. The temptation to skip the more humiliating and dreaded meetings that still remain may be great. Let's not talk prudence while practicing evasion. It is usually safe to talk in complete frankness with those who have been seriously affected. We needn't wallow in excessive remorse before those we have harmed, but amends at this level should always be forthright and generous. So then it talks about some things that we should not make direct amends for, and it says it does not lighten our burden when we recklessly make the crosses of others heavier. And then right at the end of that page, 86, it says, do we lay the matter before our sponsor or spiritual advisor, earnestly asking God's help and guidance? Okay? It's not a step you go into by yourself. And then the very last paragraph in the 12 by 12 says, above all, we should try to be absolutely sure that we are not delaying because we are afraid. For the readiness to take the full consequences of our past acts and to take responsibility for the well-being of others at the same time is the very spirit of step 9. So lots more in there. I skipped around a lot. There's lots more in there. Very, very good stuff to think about and read. So I thought we would talk a little bit about the process of making an amends. Now, there's lots of ways to do this. This is simply the way I do it, right? So don't get your drawers in a knot if this is new to you or it doesn't appeal to you. The first thing I do is I have a sponsor get three by 5 cards and write down their amends. So who do you think you owe an amends for? So the name goes on the card. What is the direct nature of the harm you caused? So I want them to tell me why they feel they owe this person an amends, okay? And I think that if you're going to make an amends to another human being, you should be able to figure that out, right? You should be able to say what the direct nature of the harm was. That goes on the 3x5 card. And now, why do we do it on 3x5 cards? Because I'm not interested in a novel, right? I just want the gist of what's going on. And I think it helps people to really focus when you don't give them a notebook, right? They have a 3x5 card to write this on. The first part of the amends should be forthright, honest, and clear, and no excuses for my behavior, right? So I would say to someone, now amends is kind of a formal word, so I don't always use the word amends. Sometimes I say apology. I would like to make an apology to you for something I've done that I feel has harmed you. Super simple, okay? This is the behavior that I am sorry for. Like with children, like if I was aggressive with them, yelling at children, that's amends worthy. Being overly restrictive, not giving them a chance to do the things they really are wanting to do. Be very specific about what you feel the harm was, and be brief, okay? Again, most of the people that we make amends to, if they know us, they're more interested in what we're going to do now than a story about what happened in the past. I never excuse myself. I don't say, well, I did that because I was in this church and I believed that I should and that it would help you in the long run and save your life, right? No, that's an excuse, right, for bad behavior. They don't need to hear that. They just need to know that I'm sorry, okay? No excuses. And then when I'm done, and it's usually pretty quick, I ask the person if there's anything they would like to say to me. It is at that moment in time that I bite my tongue so I can't talk. Because it's my job to be quiet and respectful. Not interrupt. No interrupting. People get to tell me how my behavior affected them and how my behavior made them feel. They get to tell me that. Okay? When they're done speaking, I make sure they're done. Is there anything else you want to say? No. Then I ask this question. Is there anything I can do to make this right? Is there anything you would like to see me do? What would you like to see me do about this? And listen quietly. Barb?
I tried to put that question in an amend, and the sponsor I had said, take that out. Don't ask that.
Okay.
And I said, why? She goes, because you're going to state right here what you're going to do differently. You are not going to be calling her daughter a brat anymore.
Right.
You are not going to be doing, whatever.
Well, I actually kind of like that. So I would still ask this question, but at the end of it, it says what our intention is, and I state that. My intention is to have the best possible relationship with you that I can have. And I'm not doing this anymore. I'm done with it. I put it down. And I am not going to behave this way anymore. Okay? So you kind of have to be ready for this, right? You kind of have to be in a place where you're really connected enough to God and love that your behavior changes. Now, do we become perfect people? No, we do not. We're still going to make mistakes. That's what the 10th step is for, right? We continue to take personal inventory, and if we screw up, we admit it promptly to the people that we've screwed up with. But I think I like this formal process, and I like this intention to have the best possible relationship with human beings on the planet. And we talked in the A step that could mean different things for different people we're involved with. Anne has told stories about her daughters. Maybe in that situation, civility, right, is the best outcome right now. I will tell you that my children had to observe me for a very, very long time, some of them, before they started believing I was different and trusting me again. And it was my job to be very, very patient with that.
I just got thinking about that question. because, I'm stating what I'm going to do differently, they may have a different idea of that.
Right.
Like, I want you to pay $200 a month with interest when I'm going to just pay the $200 a month.
Right. So is there anything I can do to make this right? If it's somebody I owe money to, or if it's somebody I've harmed, they might make an exorbitant demand on me. So what I would say in that situation is, I hear you, I do, and I want some time to think about how I can make this work out. And I will come back to you with that information, and then I don't delay in doing that. If someone wants me to pay them $200 a month and I really can't do that, I can make a counter offer, right? I can come back to them and say, this is what my budget looks like and this is what I can afford right now. Okay? So it's not like a closed door. There could be things that come up in the amends process that need to be talked about further, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay?
My first longtime sponsor, her sponsor, I called my grand sponsor. My sponsor was 15 years younger than I, and sometimes I would talk to the grand sponsor because we had children of a similar age, and she understood.
Cool.
Anyway, but she added this to my amends. Is there anything in my power I can do, etc.? And the reason she said that is she came from a Mormon family.
Right.
And the Mormons believe that the whole family has to go to
Heaven together. Yeah.
And she had serious amends to make to her mother.
Huh.
And she just knew that what her mother would say would
Come back to the church.
come back
Yeah.
to the church. So that, is there anything in my power?
I like that too,
Yeah,
Anne.
I thought that was...
It kind of sets it up that it's not, sort of a blank check
No,
kind of thing.
No, right.
Yeah. And that's important with some people. Good. Any questions about any of that? Does it make sense?
If they are to respond out of their woundedness, possibly still, or their resentment, they're still holding, even though you've done your side of the story.
Right.
And they were to make a request that is out of that woundedness, that is, unhealthy basically, without doing harm to me, but I don't know, you just respect that you just respect where they are, and as long as it's not doing harm to me or to others, it's just they're protecting themselves, and I don't want anything else to do with you.
Oh,
or
okay.
Even if you live across the street from them.
Right.
And you cannot, not see them.
Right.
What if they were saying something like, well, just don't approach me or my girlfriend, just leave us alone.
I would respect that.
Yeah, that's
Totally.
what I thought. You just-
Yeah,
that's
totally.
where they are.
Say, that's not going to be a problem.
Yeah.
I respect your wishes.
Okay.
Right. Because that's a reasonable thing to ask if there's been problems. They might feel like that's what they really need.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't harm you, right? It doesn't harm
I just
me.
have more work to do on the rejection thing.
Right,
Yes.
the rejection
I'm saying
thing, yeah.
it gets triggered, but
Right.
that's okay.
Cool. All right, good. La. Who knows what time it is?
6:11.
Oh, we're going to finish early on step 9? That seems weird. Karen?
You're going to talk about when we don't make an amend.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about when we don't make an amend. That's very good. Thank you. When would we not make an amends? We've harmed somebody. We're aware that we harmed them. We're not going to make an amends. Why not?
All the time we should do that.
We're going to delete that. Good. So who can think of some examples of when to do an amends would cause greater harm?
When you've had an affair and the other person doesn't know about it.
Yeah. Sometimes infidelity is not amended because, in truth, it could cause more harm if that were to become known, right? So that's something you'd want to work through. And again, it's not a rule, but that would be something you'd want to look at really seriously. Okay. Gossip, we've talked about gossip. We never make amends for gossip to the person we gossiped about. We make amends to the people we gossiped to. What would that look like?
Gossip.
What'd you say?
What was the question?
When do we not make amends?
And then you said something about gossiping.
Okay, so if we're involved with gossip, we don't make amends to the people we gossiped about. They may be blissfully unaware
I got you, yeah.
that we've been trashing them.
Yeah.
We make amends to the people we gossiped to.
Can you give me an example of that? What would you say to the person you gossip?
Okay, so I would come to you and I'd say, Thalia, last week after the meeting, when I engaged you in a conversation about fill in the blank, whoever, that was unkind of me. It might not even be true. I'm not sure it's even true. I was running that person down to try to make myself feel better. It's not going to happen again. I'm sorry for that behavior. Is there anything you'd like to say to me?
I like that.
So when you got to go to the police and say, okay, I stole their
Stuff. Okay.
car.
Anytime the police are involved, Barb, it can be very complicated. Like, I'm going to own that when I was a teenager, I did some shoplifting, okay? So how did I make amends for that? Well, there was a business that I'd stolen from that was still in business. I sent them a check. And I said, when I was a kid, I stole from you, and I think this probably will cover the damages that I did to your business. I'm very sorry. If you want to talk to me more about this, my name, phone number, and address are on this check. Feel free to get in contact with me.
So regardless of your age, you may have been 7, 8 years old.
No, I was older than that.
But if you were younger.
So if I were a kid, maybe
go into
not. Maybe
Yeah,
not,
we'll get to that
you
other-
know. Kids do stuff when they're scared and weird and figuring stuff out.
I'm thinking,
But as an adult, I would owe an amends. So, and
I'm
then,
thinking jail time.
yeah, well, that's why it can be complicated. There was another business I stole from, and that business was closed. I made a donation to charity in the amount that I figured I'd stolen from them. I gave it to a nonprofit as restitution for what I did.
Okay.
Okay? So, sponsors help me with that stuff.
Yeah, if you've got a really good job and you don't want to lose that job because you may have to spend 2 years in jail,
Then you're going to have some long talks with your sponsor, and you're going to work through it.
Okay.
And you're going to figure out what you need to do and what that's going to look like. Especially if other people are involved. Do you have a thought, Kate?
Yeah, I did, but it's actually different from this question, so I'll wait till we finish with this question.
Okay.
So what about amending money if you declare bankruptcy?
That's a really good question. And again, I think I'd work with my sponsor on that. I work for a nonprofit that provides housing for low-income families. And when we look at their credit rating, there's certain things, if it's on their credit rating, we automatically forgive them for it, like medical expenses, which can be huge, right? I mean, people are often doing the very best that they can. It's not about a rule. It's sort of more about the spirit of what we're talking about here. And what we're really doing is we're owning our behavior, and we're changing that behavior. So a lot of times this is a discussion with your sponsor that can be, a kind of a long discussion. Who else wanted some? Elizabeth?
Your question was when else might we not make amends, or it would be harmful to the person. And it occurs to me that people that are really ill, that are psychotic, that may be more harmful to them. Because they can build it into
Right. So, you know, anytime we're dealing with people who are mentally ill, that's a good time to sit down and to really think about what's in everybody's best interest. And if I can't make a direct amends, I can still make a living amends. I change my behavior. To me, the living amends are the ones that have really rocked my life, really rocked it, changed it. Okay.
Also, if people haven't done the resentment inventories thoroughly,
Yeah.
if they're carrying a resentment, then they shouldn't make the amend yet.
That's so smart, Karen. Like, you've got to, the steps are in order for a reason, right? And you really need a good fourth and fifth step before you figure out whether you owe amends or not. Or you're going to hurt people. You just are. You're going to hurt yourself too.
My initial inventory, I somehow had gotten the impression that every resentment I wrote, I had an amend to make for.
Right.
And this is where I had to rely on my sponsor, because some of them, I certainly had to look at my part.
Right.
But I had been done, I can think of two very large ones to begin with. I had been done harm.
Right.
You know, so I did not have an amend to make, but I needed to write about that resentment.
Good. To figure that out.
To figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. There are times when we don't owe amends. Because, and that's why I say, write down the direct nature of the harm that you did. You think you owe this person amends? Tell me why. In what way did you harm them? How were they harmed? If you can't do that, at the very least, that amends is on hold. Because you need to be able to tell me why you owe an amends. What was the harm done?
I think half the time the people don't even know,
That could be true.
but I guess we still make it.
Yeah. I think you do. Kate, what was your thought?
What do you do if a lot of the harm you've done is to yourself?
Oh, perfect question in an Al-Anon meeting. I love this question. So now I have to tell you one more story. You guys are going to be happy when I'm done with this, and you don't have to hear my stories anymore. My first trip through the steps, my Al-Anon sponsor, I made amends to everybody on my list, and then she said, "What are your amends to yourself?" And I didn't want to make amends to myself. Like, I'm not doing that. That's lame. I'm not going to do it. And so what I did about that is I talked about it to people who I knew didn't believe in making amends to themselves. I lined those people up. I said, these are my thoughts. They said, I agree. And I didn't make amends to myself. And I sat in that puddle for about 9 months because I didn't want to make amends to myself. I wasn't going to do it. And finally, I'll never forget it. I can remember it like it was yesterday, and it was a long time ago. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my journal, and I was willing to make amends to myself. So I wrote myself a letter, and I told myself what I was not going to do with me anymore. And I meant it. And you know, I don't know, friends, sometimes in this step work, it just feels like the heavens open up, right? And you can just feel grace and God's love. And I felt that as soon as I wrote that letter. I was sitting in my kitchen going, ooh, I wonder what this is and how I can replicate it again. Because it was so amazing to me. And you know, I lived that letter. Not perfectly, but I was mean to myself, and I had a lot of self-hatred, and that was the beginning of that changing for me. I know I've mentioned this before, but at that time I weighed almost 300 pounds. I was on medicines for migraines, sleeplessness, anxiety, depression. I was a little bit of a mess, right? I'm not on any of those medicines anymore. You know, and I'm about 95 pounds under my top weight right now, which is a miracle. It's a miracle to me that that could happen. And that's part of the amends process to myself, you know.
I think somewhere in the book it says profound personality change.
Yeah. So I had people that didn't recognize me.
Wow.
Yeah, a few years after I started working steps. They'd bump into me and they'd, yeah, it's me.
Did you hear harps in your room when the...
I did not hear any harps, but man, I felt that. Oh man, it was cool.
And then living it out.
And then living it out. Like, you can't just say it, friends. What you say has very little weight if your actions don't follow
So then when
it.
you were writing that letter, did you have all the answers of how you were going to be different to yourself? You didn't have
I didn't
to help you?
I didn't have answers, but from the process of the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th step, I did have a clear idea of who I was and what I do and what God would have me do different. Not just with myself, but with everybody, right? And so that letter was about, you know, it was about learning to love myself. It was learning to quit pushing myself around, learning to stop criticizing, stuffing my feelings with food, all of it. Like, it was a really solid letter. And I think God helped me write it. And I think my reluctance to write it actually helped. So there's different ways you can make amends to yourself. That was the way I did it. It worked. And it was a beautiful experience for me. And you might not want to talk about that in AA meetings. You could line up those people I lined up. You don't have to do that. Yay! That's such good news, because I don't want to. Cool. Now I'm feeling like it's probably closer to time to wrap it up. I can't believe we got
25.
awesome. So step 9, musical references, because the promises, friends. Oh God, I can't believe I didn't read these yet. But I did remember, didn't I? Ha! I love the promises. Here are the promises out of the Big Book. After step 9 is when the promises are listed. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will, check this out, guys, they will always materialize if we work for them. What? I remember the first time I read that and I was like, no way, no way.
And I
Never
remember-
gonna happen.
I remember the first time I read it.
Oh, you do, Anne?
And it sealed me into the program because I said, that's what I want.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I want. Not to regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. holy cow, right? Fear of
Right.
people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know what to do in situations that used to baffle us. We're going to have a new peace and a new happiness. Sign me up. And if I have to do this to get there, all right. All right. I'm in. I'm willing. Yep. Amends have never hurt me. They've been nothing but good for me. So the musical references I chose, Give Me Love by George Harrison. Can you hear that in your head? Give me love, give me love, give me peace on earth, give me light, give me life. That one, beautiful, beautiful song. And this Warren Zevon song, oh my God, I love this song. Keep Me in Your Heart. Who knows who Warren Zevon is? Do you guys know Warren Zevon? Do you know the song Werewolves of London? Okay. That's Warren Zevon. Wonderful songwriter. And he died early, as did George Harrison. And this song, Keep Me in Your Heart for a While, such a good song. And it's and it just reminds me of how transitory life is and how important it is for me to live the life I want to live. Like it's gone, friends, in a blink. Important to live the life I want to live. We did it. We got through step 9 in an hour.
You gonna read your Happy Woman sonnet?
I have a poem called Happy Woman Sonnet, but I think, is it 6:30?
Let's listen.
Oh, you want to hear it? All right. So, a sonnet is another form poem with a very prescribed amount of lines and so many syllables per line. And at the end, it has a 2-line, it's called an envoy, where it sort of resolves the poem. So I wrote this poem after spending the weekend in Aspen and coming home over Independence Pass. And it's called Happy Woman Sonnet. Steve Miller Band rocked Aspen on Sunday, but Handel's Messiah gloried me home. Jeep, CD spin, Independence Pass curls, hosannas rise and fall. These mountains sit giant like God's lap, his stone knees angle into valleys. I want to turn upside down, God in the Jeep, me loose in heaven. The stars my coin purse, planets my spun tops. Clouds bank up like cities, pour themselves in me. I flex the ocean's round shoulders, polish the silver of lakes. Redemption granted, each living thing. But a woman's life, joy, earth, I would not trade you even for this. Gentle me down, frail and bodied. Thank you.
Alice,
Yeah.
I brought something that I found, and you all may be familiar with this book. It's fairly recent.
Huh.
Archbishop Tutu and the Dalai Lama are very close friends. And for the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday, he came and they spent a week together. And they talked about
Joy.
joy. Anyway, I came across this and I immediately thought of Alice. In fact, here's your copy of it.
Thank you,
But
Anne.
I wanted to read it to us because it just seems right for the 9th step. At the end of the week, the person who was kind of working with the Archbishop and the Dalai Lama said to the Archbishop, perhaps you could leave a thought with your readers. So this is directed to all of us who are reading. And what he said was, dear child of God, you are loved with a love that nothing can shake, a love that loved you long before you were created, a love that will be there long after everything has disappeared. You are precious with a preciousness that is totally quite immeasurable. And God wants you to be like God, filled with life and goodness and laughter and joy.
Woohoo!
Yeah,
Love
yeah,
it.
I just loved it.
Thanks, Ann.
Anyway, it made me think of you.
Oh my gosh. Yay. I'll take that. All right, friends, let's close real quick with the Serenity Prayer. And then step 10 next week. We're almost done. Whew, 3 more steps.
Yeah, I don't want to be done.
It's been really fun. Really fun.